was called the world's first pregnant man, and today he gave birth.
But the court has gone the whole way, said there is an absolute constitutional right to same-sex marriage.
Hurricane Harvey is pelting the Texas coastline.
There is an increasing attack on freedom of religion, speech, and conscience.
Welcome to the Issachar Hour, examining law, policy, and culture through the lens of the Judeo-Christian worldview to help you understand the times and know what you ought to do.
Well, good day again, and welcome to the Issachar Hour. It's always our pleasure to have you here with us. We look forward so much to getting feedback from our viewers about the things we have discussed, maybe things you want us to discuss, or maybe things that perhaps were not clear to you that you want clarified. And so we're going to provide for you the number to which you can WhatsApp your comments and an email address to which you can send feedback. So thank you again for joining us today for the Issachar Hour.
Yes, and my name is Wayne West, and you are?
I'm Doreen West, and today we'll be continuing our topic on the Christian Manifesto. What is it? Why is it necessary? And what has happened to the world? Because we have not succeeded in presenting it, living it, and defending it. So we're going to continue today to talk about the Christian Manifesto. It was presented in 1982, so many years ago, 36 years ago, I think, by a well-known Protestant Christian philosopher, you could say, Francis Schaeffer. And Francis Schaeffer was alarmed back then, nearly 40 years ago. He was alarmed at what was happening in the world and how Christians were dormant while the world was going to hell in a basket, so to speak.
Yeah, it still is.
So
it really is going to hell in a basket
it's
now.
Closer to hell in the basket.
Yeah, almost
And
there.
so he was very alarmed about this, and so he gave a kind of critique of what had happened, what was the problem. And then he gave a kind of assessment of where are we now. That was in 1982 for America. I think Jamaica is approaching that point now. And then he also...
Well, the good thing about Jamaica is that we are still nowhere near where the US
but that's
and
no
the
reason for
UK.
complacency because we're getting there pretty fast.
Yeah, well, we must make sure we don't get there at all. And in fact, that's why we're having these programs, to make sure that the Caribbean does not get there at all.
Right. So he was talking about where America was, where it was heading, for sure, if nothing was done, and what could be done about it. So it was not only that he knew the times, but he also knew what the people of God ought to do. And this is why we said last week he was a true man of Issachar. He knew the times. He was prophetic in his speech. And he also knew what they ought to do. So today we are going to continue to look at Francis Schaeffer and the Christian Manifesto.
So what have you got to say about that?
Well, first of all, I want to remind our viewers, in case those are joining us today that did not hear the first program, I want to remind them that the manifesto is simply a statement by an individual or a group of their intentions, their goals, their objectives, their motives, and the mechanisms by which they're going to achieve those ends. So we have a Communist Manifesto, for example. Some people would have known about that. And we have the Secular Manifesto, Secular Humanist Manifesto.
Three revisions of that, 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3. And described some goals. Now, not all the goals were described overtly, openly, but they are all evident in that they are working out now. And Schaeffer is describing to us what is the counterpoint to that manifesto. Because Schaeffer says, the two worldviews, there are worldviews, there are ways of looking at the world. The two worldviews cannot meet, will not meet, cannot mix together, and are naturally, inevitably, and totally, and always opposed to each other. So the secular humanist worldview, which says, in the beginning, nothing. And the Christian worldview, which says, in the beginning, God.
Well, they wouldn't say at the beginning was nothing, although of course
That's what they mean.
That's what they would have to imply, because they'd have to mean that nothing created
everything
from itself, nothing, which is totally ridiculous. The first thing about the secular humanist and atheism is that it's totally incoherent. What do we mean by incoherent? It never makes any sense if you analyze it to its logical conclusions. So the atheists used to believe at one time that the universe was eternal. It was always here. This was until a combination of Einstein's theory together with the fact that Hubble, a guy called Hubble using his telescope, recognized certain what they call Doppler shift in distant galaxies. We don't need to go into that. But putting all of those things together, there was the conclusion that, the universe actually started. It had a beginning. People refer to it as the Big Bang. Whatever that means. But what it means is that the universe wasn't always here. And as the argument goes, anything that had a beginning must have a cause. And since the universe was not always here, it would have had to have a cause. But the atheists are not willing to say that that cause was God. So they prefer to say that it was always here, even though the science, which they claim to believe in, indicates that it was not always here. But they will not accept that.
Well, some of them say, like Stephen Hawking, for example. Stephen Hawking says the universe came into being, but it created itself using the laws of physics.
From nothing. No, John Lennox was right when he said nonsense spoken by even a brilliant man is utter nonsense. And what Hawkins just said there, what you said Hawkins said, which he did in fact say, is nonsense. Why? Because the laws of physics are descriptions of how the matter in the universe functions.
They can't create anything.
They don't create anything. So if there is nothing, it cannot create laws about how matter in the universe.
And also, nothing can create itself.
Yeah. It is nonsense. We must learn to appreciate that a lot of intelligent and well-educated people speak a lot of nonsense. It happens all the time.
Right. So Schaeffer is saying, look, it goes back to the roots of it.
Yeah.
And based on the roots of the worldview, the two worldviews separate at the roots.
Yeah.
So you can't try to mix them at the outcomes because they're separated at the very root.
Yeah.
Either there's a God and there's a personal, infinite, universal law-making God who existed and who brought things into existence, or there is just matter, energy, and chance.
And the science is on the side that there is an intelligence behind the universe for a couple of reasons. One, we said that in terms of life, living organism, DNA is a code. A code means that something is used as a symbol for something else. We said in DNA that there are things called codons, which are the sugars in the bases. They are used as code for the amino acids in the proteins. And anytime something is used as a symbol for something else, it is always code and it is always the work of an intellect.
Right. So Schaeffer is saying from that worldview come a certain idea, a certain ordering of society.
That's right.
A certain definition and concept of what it means to be human and what is a human being, a certain value on all human beings from that point of view. From the other point of view, which is just matter and energy and chance, come a totally different view of reality, of society, of man, and therefore a totally reversed, opposite law and everything else comes out of the second view. And therefore, as Christians, we must realize what is happening, what we are up against. It's not just some people doing this action and some doing that action. It's a worldview difference.
And again, as Christians, we must recognize that atheism, this quote, a lack of belief in God, is really an utterly foolish worldview. It does not bear any relationship to reality. Because, for example, let us go back again once more to something that we did last week. In order to appear sensible, listen carefully, in order to appear sensible, atheists, the people who are now basically secular humanists, would like to believe that matter evolved itself into complex and diverse living organisms. And they say Darwin's theory of evolution is what provides the intelligent basis for that. Again, it is nonsense. None of them can cite any example of an organism that was produced by evolution. They cannot provide the transitions from the previous organism to the resulting organism and the mechanism by which those transitions occur. You can ask any evolutionary biologist anywhere, they cannot provide you with that answer. Even one example of a transition from one organism to a radically different organism and the mechanisms by which that transition was achieved. It's not in the scientific literature, it's in the fantasy of evolutionary biologists.
So you are emphasizing the incoherent nature of the belief system.
Yeah.
Schaeffer doesn't speak so much about that. Schaeffer is emphasizing the inevitable outcomes of those beliefs. And he's saying if you adhere to secular humanism, man being the measure and the center of it all, because there is no other mind but man's mind on the earth. There is no other source of value, of reason than man. If you accept that, the outcome for society, for law, is going to be radically different. So Schaeffer in the Christian Manifesto is talking about the outcomes, what the outcomes will be, and how inevitable they are, and how totally different they'll be based on one worldview and based on another. Now, one of the points you made last week was that persons sometimes say, oh, America is a secular state, or Jamaica is a secular state, or Trinidad and Tobago is a secular state. It is not a theocracy. As if to say those are the only two options, when in fact there's a third option.
Of course.
There's a plural democracy.
Of course.
And Schaeffer goes further in his book and in his talk to say, by pluralism though, they are trying to say that not only different views exist, but nowadays we have the incoherent again thought that they are all equal. They are all equally valuable, you see? And that's another way of bringing in nonsense to say many views exist. Now, we agree with that. Every view has a right to try to defend itself in the public square. We certainly agree with that. But now they're saying, oh, they are all equally valid. And we certainly do not agree with that.
You know, people, our listeners must understand that the devil is a liar. But the devil is not going to come and say, I am the devil, I'm coming to lie to you. No, the devil is not going to say that. He's going to develop some system, particularly with the sophisticated and intelligent people of the university, to create things that are either lies or that suppress the truth. And then he's going to present that to you in a form mixed up with some truth, because it is only a very foolish liar who will come with the most blatant lies. For example, I'm not going to come to you and tell you I jumped over the moon. You would know that I'd be talking nonsense. But if I can mix it up with some little things that would make it sound good and then tell you I jump over the moon, then maybe you might be more willing to accept it. And this is what we are seeing with this illogical worldview, this secular humanist atheist worldview, which cannot provide a basis for law, but comes now as the basis on which law should be made.
Right. So on the first video that we're going to look at shortly, Schaeffer is making the point, and he makes his point very strongly. And it's a point that everyone must consider, really. And the point he's making is that it is not that the worldview of secular humanism, which is that there is no God, man is the measure, man is the center, man is the whole story. It is not just that that worldview may lead to anarchy, may lead to nihilism, which means that, everything goes, right? There's, everything is okay, right? It is not that it may lead to it, it is that it must lead to it. It must. If man is the measure of all things, man is going to make law based on his desires.
Tell me about it.
Right. And so you're going to get moral nihilism. And you're going to get anarchy because there's no overarching there's no overarching lawmaker that to which men look for the foundation for their laws. So Francis Schaeffer is making the very, very important point that we must emphasize. It is not just that secular humanism may lead to these things. It is that it must
Inevitable.
It is inevitable. There's a mathematical certainty, as he says, that it is going to lead to these things because there is no other thing for it to lead to.
I think we say it have to bound to must.
Must, yes.
Have to bound to must.
Has to bound to must lead to that ordering of society with moral nihilism and anarchy. There is no right or wrong. Everything goes, and there is no absolute right or wrong to say what should be done and what should not be done. It is law based on desire, bereft of reason.
Yes, absolutely.
And Schaeffer will give some examples, at least one example in his time, of where the Supreme Court which is well accustomed to power, took upon itself to create law, to read into the Constitution what they wanted to read into the Constitution, and to create law. And this is what he means, that arbitrariness will rule in secular humanism.
So we're going to look at this video, and then we're going to come back and give you a very concrete example
of what is
happening. That arbitrariness.
But it is not only that man must start from himself in the area of knowledge and learning, but any value system must come arbitrarily from man himself by arbitrary choice. And more frightening still, in our country, at our own moment of history, is the fact that any basis of law then becomes arbitrary, merely certain people making decisions as to what is for the good of society at the given moment. Now, this is the real reason for the breakdown in morals in our country. It's the real reason for the breakdown in values in our country. And it is the reason that our Supreme Court now functions so thoroughly upon the fact of arbitrary law. They have no basis for law that is fixed. Therefore, like the young person who decides to live hedonistically upon their own chosen arbitrary values, society is now doing the same thing legally. That a certain few people come together and decide what they arbitrarily believe is for the good of society at the given moment, and that becomes law. The worldview that the final reality is only material or energy shaped by pure chance, inevitably, that's the next word I would bring to you, inevitably, mathematically, with mathematical certainty, brings forth all these other results, which are in our country and in our society, which has led to the breakdown in the country, in society, and which are its present sorrows. So if you hold this other worldview, you must realize that it is inevitable that we will come to the very sorrows of relativity and all these other things that are so represented in our country at this moment of history.
Now, Francis Schaeffer pointed out in the Christian Manifesto, in order to understand the times that we are living in, and recognize that when you remove God, from the discussion in terms of public policy, and you allow what the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago wishes to happen, but which is not a part of the Trinidad and Tobago Constitution, that a place like Trinidad and Tobago is a secular state, when you make that claim, what you are doing is that you are preparing the ground, and you are allowing the atheists, the secular humanists, to become the dominant power brokers for law and public policy. And, you can see how this works out. We're going to give you some examples. In 2006, a group of 26 persons, no person from the Caribbean, none, went to a place called Yogyakarta in Indonesia to draft what they call the Yogyakarta Principles. Now, at least when God came into covenant, when God gave the Israelites laws, he said, listen, I did certain things for you. I brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. So therefore, have no other gods before me. No, the people who made the Yogyakarta Principles, they didn't come into any covenant with the people in the Caribbean. They made these principles. Which principles are going to be as binding as the covenant and the 10 Commandments on the people of the Caribbean?
If we allow it.
If we allow it. Yeah. Let me just repeat that.
We don't have to allow it.
At least God took the children of Israel out of bondage.
And established bona fides for telling them.
No, these people, these Ubermensch, these overlords, they didn't, as Friedrich Nietzsche said, they didn't establish any such thing. They are 26 important people. Because they are important, and I suppose they determine that they are important, and they drew up some principles which the UN has accepted, and which the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies certainly embraces, because the Faculty of Law brought one of the 26 persons, one of these guards, one of the 26 guards who drew up that thing, Professor Wintermute. He was brought to the three campuses, the Bonas, Cavehill and St. Augustine campus, And clearly, the people of the Caribbean are going to come to live under those principles which have been established by these new gods. The problem is nobody in the Caribbean knows about the Yogia Carter principles. Nobody knows about these gods, and most people probably don't know about Professor Wintemute and these other gods who made up these things.
But we are seeing the effects of it.
Yes, because these principles are establishing rights.
Yeah, new rights.
Now, we are under the rule of law. So if you establish rights and somebody doesn't, and let's say I don't give people the rights which have been established by the Yogia Carter principles. Remember, Francis Schaeffer said that in the American Constitution, it was the acknowledgement of a creator.
A creator who gave all men inalienable rights.
No.
Now, inalienable means they cannot be removed from you. They cannot be separated from you. So long as you're a human being, those rights are a part of you. They cannot be taken out of you. You go together. And so it is important for us to realize that the concept of even having, even the existence of inalienable rights is linked to the concept of there being a creator who endows every person created with those rights. That's a very important point.
But that was when we were under the Judeo-Christian worldview.
Yes.
Now that you move on to this secular humanist, atheist concept, materialist worldview, you have new gods. And
yes, but
you
people must realize that when you remove the creator, you remove also the inalienable rights.
Yes.
Because they are linked.
So the rights.
This is how we come to this point.
So the rights you get now are the rights that the elite,
the
Ubermensch,
decide
the overlord,
may have.
the faculty of law at the University of West Indies, the Professor Wintemute,
and others.
the groups like Europe, what they determine are the rights
that you may have.
And of course, when you have activist judges like Chief Justice Benjamin in Belize, those are the rights that are now going to be imposed on the people of the Caribbean. Yes, and they are not inalienable. They can be taken away.
Because a group of elites gives you those rights, they can change them or they can take them away. Inalienable rights cannot be removed or changed. They are given to you. And so this is what we must realize.
And so this is what we are living under. If we allow it, it is a very dangerous thing. At least you should have some discussion in the public square. But no discussion.
This is why I can decide what you may or may not do, because I am so and so. I did so and so for you.
Yeah.
I am wise. I am loving.
At least Professor Wintemute and the other 25 people should at least come to the people of the Caribbean. The faculty of law should at least come to the people of the Caribbean and say, well, we are wiser. We are more intelligent. So therefore, let us debate this thing. But that's not happening.
When Professor Wintemute came to the Faculty of Law at Mona, we were both there listening to him.
Yes, we had to be there because it was important.
He took great pains at the very outset of his talk to tell us how he was gay and how he was in the class looking at other gay students and wondering which one he liked and which one he wouldn't like, and finding out who could get them to meet him or introduce them together. And he said, oh yes, so his gayness was very much a part of his presentation to us. You know,
absolutely.
He didn't hide it.
But when we weren't convinced that he was someone who came down on Mount Sinai in lightning and thunder and had that capacity, so we asked some hard questions.
Yes.
I don't think people were very pleased about the hard questions. But the people of the Caribbean need to ask these overlords, these people who see themselves as the elite and the Ubermensch, as Friedrich Nietzsche said, who are seeking to impose a legal structure on you with rights to buggery and so on, where they got their wisdom from. Are they eternal? Did they make the universe? Did they, these are the questions that God asked Job. And I don't recall, I don't know of any, but among those 26 who had that capacity,
God asked
who had the wisdom.
Were you there when I stretched out the heavens?
No. But they're coming to make rights to put us under. and the justices, the activist judges are seeking to organize that those rights are quote unquote rights are imposed on the people of the Caribbean.
Yes, and Schaeffer did say that, look, when people reject the idea of the infinite personal creator, God, and adhere to the worldview that it's just matter or energy and chance, determining how those two are combined to form whatever we have now. When Schaeffer says, whenever we reject one and allow the other one, or we go to sleep with one and allow the other one to come into the public square, he says there are three possibilities for for where the ruling is going to come from now, the authority.
Yeah.
He said one could be academia and
And we see that the Faculty of Law at the University of West Indies takes upon itself the role of overlord. Yeah.
Okay.
And let me just say something with the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies. Some of the members of the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies who have been appointed or were appointed to the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. Now, like I know of one individual who was appointed to that commission based on the recommendation, lobbying of all the LGBT groups throughout Latin America and the Caribbean.
And then they rule on the LGBT issues.
And then what they call a rapporteur position was established in the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights for LGBT persons. So having
an incestuous
lobbied to have someone who was from the Faculty of Law placed on the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. That person becomes a rapporteur. Now, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights is now asked to rule on same-sex marriage, or the court itself is asked to rule on same-sex marriage. So what do you think? What do you think they're going to rule with respect to same-sex marriage? They rule that all states must recognize same-sex marriage. Now, that's a no-brainer. You know. If the people who lobby to put persons on that place, they will have influence on, I think there's the Inter-American Commission and then there's the court. Right. But it's one and the same mix-up and blender. Yeah, there may be different persons on the court, but the culture, the motivations, the ideology of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights is consistent. Is an LGBT secular humanist type of ideology. And so the court ruled that all states must have same-sex marriage. Well, no surprises there. What else will it rule?
If you lobby to have a committee made up of cows, let's just say.
Yeah.
There's a committee made up of cows, and you lobby to have this committee, cows on this committee, right? And then you ask the committee to decide, should hamburgers be legal or not? Well, of course you would hardly be surprised when the committee says no, they should not be, because the committee is trying to protect their own interests and the persons who put them there. So it's the same thing. If you make a committee of cows, don't ask them to rule on whether hamburgers should be eaten or legal, okay? It's not going to happen. So that's the kind of incestuous relationship.
There was a ruling, I think, in Sussex sometime in the early part of the last century. And the final, one of the statements that came out of that ruling, that justice must not only be done, but it must be manifestly and undoubtedly be seen to be done. Something to that effect. Now, when you appeal to the people who you lobby to put into position, what kind of judgment are you going to get? Now, at present, Barbados is still under the jurisdiction of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, that is the court. So therefore, since that ruling that all same-sex marriage must be acknowledged, Barbados is almost, I don't know if it's bound, I don't know what the exact arrangements are, but you can see
it was ratified there.
You can see the implication for Barbados. But more than that, there are two cases, or at least one case, going now from Barbados to the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. Now that is what you call monkey business or kangaroo, because we know what the judgment is going to be.
Based on who were
appointed
and by whom they were lobbied to.
If I appoint my friends, and
those
to the
who
court,
share your worldview,
and those who share my worldview to the court, what judgment are you going to get out of that?
Right. So Schaefer said it's possible rulers now, the new rulers are going to come from possibly one academia.
Yeah.
We can see how that could happen. Then he said,
we see how it is happening.
Then he said those who control technology, because he saw that technology was going to be a big part in the. He said those who control the technology can control things too, and we see that happening.
Controlling information.
Yeah, and you know that recently PragerU was their things were just totally blocked off.
Prager University. Oh yeah, blocked off on YouTube and on Facebook.
So Schaefer saw this too. He said those who control the technology.
Well, I can tell you about things that I know firsthand. We have a media house in Jamaica called the Gleaner, and I know firsthand that someone sent an online comment to the Gleaner, merely stating that it is not settled science that homosexuality is innate, meaning that you are born that way, and immutable, meaning that you cannot change. In other words, the science has not determined that. In fact, the science determined quite the contrary. It's not, you're not born that way. That's why identical twins are not the same sexual orientation. If it were genetic, all identical twins would have exactly the same sexual orientation, meaning that if one is homosexual, the other will be homosexual. That is not so. It's only about 50% agreement. So clearly it's not genetic, it's not innate. Secondly, it's not immutable. It is well documented that people's sexual orientation can change. The Gleaner did not allow that online comment to be posted.
So that's an example. So Schaeffer said, look, academia will take over, right? Power. Then he said, okay, those who control technology will take over the power. And thirdly, he said the courts will take over the power. Those are the three centers of power that Schaeffer said will come and take power once people have left an infinite personal God as the beginning of everything and gone to man as the center of everything. Every man cannot rule. No. Every man's idea cannot be active in the public square. It's going to be power brokers. And he said the academia, those who control technology, and the courts are going to be controlling the public square. And Schaeffer was doing this in 82, 81, 82, right? And so he was pointing out to people, look at Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade is a Supreme Court decision, 7-2 in 1973, that said there's a right to abortion. And Schaeffer was saying that's an arbitrary law, because what the 7 judges did is that they said somewhere in the 14th Amendment, under the right to privacy, under the penumbra of that amendment, you can find that there's a right to abortion. And so they made this law, that there's a right to abortion. And Schaeffer was saying, you see, 7 judges, 7 judges sitting there as the power brokers took it upon themselves to totally repeal, totally redefine the value of an unborn child, and totally disabuse themselves totally of the abortion laws that existed in all the states in America. And he was showing us an example of where judges now, the courts, are now taking up the power. Because somebody is going to have the power. Nietzsche said that when we have killed God, we ourselves must then become God.
So you see, what happened is that the judges are saying, you know, the concept, the feminists, the third wave feminists now claim there is a right to kill the innocent. There is a right to buggery. Now listen to this. And there are two judges in the Caribbean have now ruled that there is a right to buggery. Now we know that buggery has a high risk of HIV. Now buggery is not essential to human beings, you know. It's not essential to the species. Men buggering each other it has nothing to do with the survival of the species. So why there is a right for men to bugger each other is beyond me.
So how does that match with Darwinian evolution then, since it hardly helps?
It hardly helps.
Survival of the species.
Not only that.
It works against it, doesn't it?
Any unbiased analysis of the origin or the start of the HIV AIDS pandemic can trace it right back to the addictive behavior of men who had sex with men in bathhouses in places like California.
So saying that is all right is purely arbitrary.
It's arbitrary.
It is purely law based on desire.
Which Aristotle said that law should be reason, free of passion.
Free of passion. Yeah.
But now we're having law which is passion,
free of reason.
Free of reason.
So and in our time,
let me just repeat that. Aristotle said law should be reason, free of passion. He said something to that effect. Law should be reason, free of passion. In the arbitrary process of lawmaking that we are seeing now, that
because the judicial power, the activism of the
judges, to like Chief Justice Kenneth Benjamin putting 2 members of Australia on the Belizean people, is law based on desire, free of reason.
Right. So Schaeffer in his time, he could point to Roe, and he said, look, these 7 men sat down and just did this, you know. But in our time, 2015, we know that's 7 men. 5 to 4, this one was 5 to 4 actually. It was closer than Roe, 5 to 4. They sat there and they said, look, there's a right to same-sex marriage. In the Constitution, they went and found that. In the same 14th Amendment, you know. They went and looked at it and reinterpreted it and said, look, we can see that in it. And so
Well, if you're postmodern, you could find anything in anything. Anything in anything. I can say everything.
Right. So Schaeffer was showing the Christian world back in the 80s. He said, if those 3 sources, those 3 power brokers take up the power, academia, those who control the technology
business
and the activism of the judiciary,
Yeah.
if they take up the power, you're going to be in for a hard time.
Yeah.
And that, in fact, is what happens. So we see the power becomes authority.
and
Power becomes the authority. The judges are the power, so they
totalitarian.
make themselves the authority.
Yeah.
Okay?
And they will become totalitarian too, because they will tell you what you can and cannot say.
Right. And you know,
Because they will create other legal constructs like hate speech.
Yeah.
If you go to Facebook, for example, and type in certain things,
they will not publish it.
it will not, because it is now hate speech. So what is totalitarianism is being introduced via the law.
Via the law and via the controllers of technology. And via the judiciary.
Yeah.
Because they have power,
Yeah.
the judges have been accustomed to have power. You know, nobody votes them out.
No.
So this is the thing now. Nobody votes them out. You're a Supreme Court judge in America. You are in there until you retire or you die. Nobody votes you out.
And
So one president puts you in,
Yeah.
and you said, and you could see that there's a safety in that because
Yeah.
the judge is not beholden to any particular political power. But the other side of it is that if those judges become activists
Yeah.
for their own ideas and for
Yeah.
secularism,
Yeah.
then they're there.
They're dangerous. So,
And you can't vote them.
you know, I go back to the concept of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta really was a way of bringing the power of the king to book. So the king couldn't just arbitrarily increase taxes. And in fact, our whole parliament came out from issues like the Magna Carta. We have another source of power in our constitution, which is the judiciary. And ideally, we want to protect them. We don't want the judiciary to be forced to make decisions because of political
power.
issues or other
Influence,
issues.
yes.
But we also have to recognize that judges are human beings. And because judges are human beings, there probably is time to have another Magna Carta, but now for the judges.
Right.
Because if you allow judges they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you think about the United States, there were 31 referenda on same-sex marriage. 30 of those referenda, when the people spoke, they said, no, we do not want this. In fact, there was one in California when people spoke, and a single judge,
Overturned it.
who they said he himself was homosexual,
Definitely.
overturned the referendum.
The will of the people.
The will of the people.
And this is what Schaeffer is talking about.
So
He's saying that they become power. They
That's
take
right.
power because they have authority.
Yeah. So we need to protect the judiciary. There's no question we need to protect the judiciary, but we also need to protect ourselves from the judiciary, because a corrupt judiciary, an activist judiciary, is that dangerous.
It's a danger to democracy.
It's democracy.
And we can see that clearly.
And we
because
can see that clearly.
Now in America,
Yeah.
5 persons have said, look, this is the way men can marry men and women can marry women. Millennia of tradition and that certain ordering of society has been turned. So Schaeffer was on key, very much on key about that.
And the thing about it, men marrying men doesn't stop there. It means you have to now tell children in school that is now normal and good. And the implications that seeps through the society is where the real problems are.
Yes, and so one of the points Schaeffer also makes, that the education system will be a key target of secular humanism, because they must get to the heart and the soul of the next generation for the agenda, for the plan, for the manifesto to work out. Now, Schaeffer, in talking about nihilism and how it inevitably, as you said, it must lead to nihilism. Everything is permissible.
Yeah.
And anarchy. There's no authority but me.
Yeah.
I am. In fact, it leads to the existence of millions of gods, because each man is his own god.
That's right. In those days, there was no
king in Israel, and every man does what is right.
What is right in his own.
Right.
So we're really not creating anything new.
We're going back to the old.
We're just dealing with the same old devil business that was always there.
So,
it's just coming under fancy name.
Exactly. So Schaeffer though does not spare from his critique. The church. He doesn't spare them at all, because Schaeffer says, look, evangelical Christianity, one of the reasons why they had reached where they had reached in 82, and we are getting there in Jamaica if we don't watch it.
We are resisting in the Caribbean. It's not coming in.
Yeah. So that
a word of faith. It's not coming in the Caribbean. It's in America, it's in the USA, it's in the UK, Canada. But the word of faith says that nonsense is not coming in.
We need to learn from the lessons of others.
Oh, absolutely.
And Schaeffer said that evangelical Christianity, he thought, had drifted towards a kind of platonic, overly spiritualized style in which you emphasize private worship and no public witness. All private worship. You know, your breakthrough brigade, you go for your breakthrough, and you're worshiping. But in the public square, where are you? This is what Schaeffer was complaining about.
Christ said that city set on a hill cannot be hid.
And so Schaeffer said...
And you don't light a candle and put it under a bushel.
And Schaeffer said, being salt and light, we have a mandate of salt and light. People of God have a mandate of salt and light, to be salt and light. And Schaeffer said, look, the church in America was not fully fulfilling that mandate. He was saying that, look, being true to that mandate means that you demonstrate where you live and you defend the lordship of Christ, not over you, over your bank account, over your health, as they like to preach now, but over the entire spectrum of life. Christ is Lord not of me and you. Christ is Lord of everything.
As I recall, when Jesus was leaving, he said, go and make disciples of all
nations.
Right.
Not even individuals.
He said nations.
Right.
So that we are not to leave the public square of the nation to the devil's people. Right. We have to speak the truth into it.
And so that's what Schaeffer was saying, that was what the failing was. That the church was not in the public square. They were in the private confines, worshipping.
Still obtains,
Yes, still obtains.
It's still happening.
Worshipping in the private square, but leaving empty the public witness.
Absolutely.
And Schaeffer said that was one of the problems why the secular humanists could have gotten so far in America, in which he said the founders of America, they may not have been men filled with the Spirit individually, but they knew there was a creator, and they knew that creator gave men the rights men had. And so he said that's a problem. Now, also the other point that Schaeffer makes, and I think it's a very critical point, he's saying that, look, the idea that some Christians should wonder, should I get involved in social issues? He says that's a nonsense idea. He said, whenever was there a time when people of God were not involved in social issues? And you know, when John the Baptist preached, repent. The people came to him, the people who repented came to John and said, oh, we have repented, now what should we do? And he said, he used to take money from people as tax collectors, stop. He said he used to be corrupt, stop.
Absolutely.
He said he used to do that, stop. So he showed that social action was linked to your conversion.
But you know, if you look at the Old Testament, you know, people often think that God only punished people for sexual sin and so on. But if you look at the Old Testament, if you don't take care of the widows, those sort of things.
And he said, no, he said, if you treat the foreigner and the slave badly, I will kick you out of the land because you were foreigners and you were slaves.
Absolutely.
So treat them well.
That's right.
I mean, foreigners and slaves, right?
So the Old Testament, both the Old and the New Testament are comprehensive.
Demands a certain way of life.
In the social order.
And so the people weren't asking John when they repented, now how can I get my breakthrough? They were saying, what should I do? Right? Social action.
Well, let me get the breakthrough. Right now, I think a lot of the churches just focus on the breakthrough. You know? In fact, if you came from Mars and you listen to church,
you read the big ones,
basically you will think the breakthrough is the sum total of
the gospel,
of Christian activity.
Of the gospel, yes. And so one of the things that Schaeffer we can get from reading and listening to Schaeffer is that social change ought not to have been left for the liberation theologians, those secular humanists in clerical garb, to come in and assume that the church, the true church, should have kept a handle and control on that.
Let me just say, the Catholic Church is having a lot of problems now, and as correctly it should have, because the priests have been awful, they've been evil. But the Catholic Church, for example, has a stellar record of social.
Unfortunately, now it is being totally corrupted by what is happening.
But it means that the Evangelical Church, which also has a very good record, let us be careful, because sometimes people say, what is the church doing? But the church, the Evangelical Church, Protestant Church, gives a lot.
Education
and has done a lot.
So this, as you just said, this you ought to have done, not neglecting the other things. That's the important thing, right?
Should never have left the public square to the atheists.
To the secular humanists. No. Schaeffer also makes a point that people like Lord Shaftesbury in England, who fought so hard for the poor, people like Wilberforce, who gave his life, he worked his whole life to get rid of slavery. Because he was a Christian, because he knew about the men being created equal, right? that secular humanism could never have given them the foundation and the reason and the justification for doing these things. Because the dignity of all human lives cannot be sustained based on matter and energy and chance. It cannot. And so when we look at the persons who really believe in the Creator, making men and giving them rights, we see that these people naturally have the impetus to go and fight for dignity for all human beings.
Let us get to hear Schaefer himself.
No, he's going to talk about the secular state.
About inalienable rights and so on.
Yeah, and what it means, how the secular state is
so
created.
we're gonna, and when we come back, I want to make a little statement on slavery because people talk a lot about that. But let us hear Francis Schaefer.
The secular state.
Yeah,
what that consists of.
In our country at this moment of history, it should be noticed that this new dominant worldview is a view which is exactly opposite from that of the founding fathers who founded this country. Now, not all the founding fathers of this country were individually, personally Christians. That certainly is true. But nevertheless, they founded the country on the base that there is a God who is the creator. Now I come to the next central phrase, who is the creator who gave the inalienable rights. We must understand something very thoroughly. If society, if the state gives the rights, it can take them away. They're not inalienable. If the state gives the rights, they can change them and manipulate them. But this was not the view of the founding fathers of this country. They believed, though not all of them were individual Christians, that there was a creator, and that this creator gave the inalienable rights. This upon which our country was founded, and which has given us the freedoms which we still have, even the freedoms which are being used now to destroy the freedoms. The reason that these freedoms were there is because they believed there was somebody who gave the inalienable rights, which indeed, therefore, limited the power of the state and the government specifically by these inalienable rights. But if we have the view that the final reality is material or energy, which has existed forever in some form, we must understand this view never would have given the rights which we now know, and which unhappily I say to you, those of you who are Christians, too often you take all too as much for granted. You forget that the freedoms we have had in Northern Europe after the Reformation, in the United States is an extension of that, as would be Australia or Canada or New Zealand and so on. You forget that the freedoms which we have are absolutely unique in the world. Occasionally, some of you have gone to university, have been taught that these freedoms are rooted in the Greek city-states. That is not true. All you have to do is read Plato's Republic, and you understand that the Greek city-states never had any concept of the freedoms that we have. Go back into history. The freedoms which we have, the form freedom, balance of government, all these things, they are unique in history, and they're also unique in the world at this day. A fairly recent poll of the 150-some countries that now constitute the world shows that only about 25%, only 25 of these countries have any value, have any freedoms at all. What we have and take so poorly for granted is unique. It was brought forth by a specific worldview. And that specific worldview was the Judeo-Christian worldview, and especially as it was refined in the Reformation, putting the authority, indeed, at a central point, not in the church and the state and the Word of God, but rather the Word of God alone. All the benefits which we know, I would repeat, which we have taken so easily and so much for granted, are unique. They have been founded on this certain worldview that there is a creator there to give the inalienable rights, and this other view over here, which has become increasingly dominant, of the material energy final worldview shaped by pure chance never would have, could not, has no basis of values in order to give such a balance of freedom that we have known so easily and which we unhappily, if we're not careful, take so for granted. We're now losing those freedoms, and we can expect to continue to lose them if this other worldview continues to take increased force and power in our country. We can be sure of this. I would say it again, inevitably, mathematically, all these things will come forth.
Francis Schaeffer was really a man of Issachar, a man who understood the time.
Perfectly.
He analyzed what was happening and he was able to project what would happen. I gather you have some questions there. You have
absolutely.
some questions there. Let us hear the question. Schaeffer was asking this question back in 1982.
And he was saying, if we allow the states to become a secular state, with arbitrary laws made by man alone,
as the Attorney General Hussein in Trinidad and Tobago is claiming.
Right.
And so far, I haven't heard anybody apart from Bishop Gill in Trinidad and Tobago question that. Right. So, in Jamaica, we are challenging it, and we hope the people in Barbados are challenging it as well, and other places.
Let us use Trinidad as an example.
Yeah.
Schaeffer was asked this question of American church. He was saying that if we allow it to be the widespread idea, to take root, that the state becomes a secular state.
No religious influence.
He said that secular...
Religious citizens are disenfranchised. Muslim, Hindus, and Christians.
Rejection of religious ideas, religious interpretations, religious influence completely out of the public square.
Out of the public square.
That's how it's defined. And Schaeffer said, if we allow this to happen, by saying nothing when they float this idea. So if we allow, is Mr. Hossain?
Yes, Mr. Hossain, Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago.
Statement. Trinidad is a secular state. Where did he see that?
Nowhere. In his
own
mind,
imagination.
Or his ideology.
But if Trinidad and Tobago allows that to take root and de facto to become so, it is not so. Then Schaeffer's questions could well be applied.
Well,
Schaeffer has some questions, right?
Let us hear the question.
He said, if you allow the state to be secular,
can
a minister be sued for counseling someone? Let us say someone with unwanted same-sex attraction. Can a minister be sued or punished by the state for counseling that person using spiritual rather than psychological?
Well, I think last week in California, such a law was passed.
Yes, punishing you if you try to counsel someone who has unwanted same-sex attraction and who comes to you for help.
This despite the fact that we know several persons who have left same-sex attraction
because of such counseling. All right. Okay.
Then, the overmensch, the overlords.
The power brokers. Now, second question Schaeffer asked. Can high school students assemble on a campus freely for prayer or religious discussions? No. In Jamaica, we know we can do this.
Oh, yeah.
We better not take it for granted.
Because we are a plural democracy.
Because we are
not a secular state. Let me repeat that. We are a plural democracy. We are not a secular state. Yeah.
And so students can assemble and do assemble on campus for prayer, worship, dancing, religious discussion. Thank God. Let it not be taken for granted. If Hossain is true, Mr. Hossain, is that his proper title?
Well, he's Attorney General. I don't know
the Honorable Attorney General.
And they are all honorable men. So are they all honorable men. All honorable men.
Yes. If the Honorable Hossain is true and says Trinidad is a secular state, you cannot guarantee that students can freely assemble on the campus. No, you can't. Okay? Can Christian teachers or students pray at the beginning of class? Think about that. Okay?
And we want the Muslims and the Hindus to recognize that they are also going to be totally disenfranchised.
Well, I think they know that in Trinidad.
You can have your school like I think St. Augustine Girls High School is a Hindu school, I think it is. You will not be able to perform your whatever rights you as Hindus do, because if you get any government assistance,
you can't do any religious thing there, okay? As they say, secularism, okay? Now, can Christian college students set the criteria, like a Christian, like an ICF group, for example, or whatever? Can they decide who will be their leader? Can they leave certain people out of their leader? Can they say that?
I gather that in America, in some universities,
they are punishing them. They're taking away all their subsistence.
They're losing their income because you are a Christian club like the InterVarsity Christian
You cannot
Fellowship.
say no atheist can be our leader. You can't say that.
You don't want the atheist to be a president.
You can't decide that.
No, this of course is totally incoherent and ridiculous, but this is being done to undermine the faith.
Right, so let's move along.
Yeah.
Can graduates of a Christian institution now, we're talking about, not a state institution, a Christian institution, lose their accreditation because of the stance the school takes on certain social issues?
Well, what happened in Canada, I think Trinity Law School in Canada declared its values in terms of sexual behavior of the persons who come
to
campus.
that school.
It was not allowed accreditation.
It was taken away.
It was taken away. And in fact, Trinity Law School, unfortunately, bowed to the pressure, and it has removed that requirement for its students.
Because if it didn't, no graduate of that school would practice law.
Yeah.
So there you go.
You know, it's all inclusive. You know, it's inclusive and diversity and tolerance.
Yeah.
Except the one thing they're not tolerating is what the overlord, the elite, these honorable men. You know, I never forget. He said what he said. It's Julius Caesar. Yeah. So are they all honorable men, and they are determining that what they want is what is going to be.
Yeah. Okay, so moving along, can a seminary refuse to graduate an openly unapologetic practicing homosexual? Can a seminary says, if you are that and you are not apologizing for it, you're open with it, can we give you the credentials to go and be a
No, the Ubermensch, the overlords will create a right that will trump the right of the
They will sue the seminary and close it down.
You have a right to graduate.
Yeah.
Even if you don't believe what it said.
Must a Christian school...
Maybe if you don't pass the exam as well, you have a right to graduate. All these things are possible. You'd be surprised.
Must a Christian school accept an otherwise qualified, must a Christian school, a school which is Christian, accept an otherwise qualified, openly practicing lesbian as a teacher? Is the school bound to accept that person?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And a secular state, the school dare not say no, you can't.
And we have a Human Rights Institute waiting on wings in Jamaica here.
In Jamaica
to insist upon just those kind of things.
Just those things, and you know, it's very silent. But you know, when a child is silent, that's when they're doing all the mischief.
Yeah.
And so we need to start watching that Human Rights Institute.
It hasn't been formed officially yet.
But they have been threatening with it.
But it is part of the strategy. Remember, the strategy is to create human rights, quote unquote, whatever those rights are, and then impose those rights on the society and punish anybody.
So, viewers in Trinidad and Tobago, if the Honorable Hossein is correct, you think about all those questions will be answered in your country if you let him say and act as if it's a secular state.
Unopposed, yes. He must be opposed.
And we are warning Jamaicans.
He must be opposed.
And we are saying Americans should have never let that idea take root in America. The American church should not have allowed it to take root that America is a secular state. It was not founded as any such thing. Yeah. The founding fathers had no such idea. And we in the Caribbean, what do they say? You must take sleep and mark death.
Yes.
And when your neighbor's house is on fire, don't just stand by and watch. You need to soak yours with water.
It is said they say in boxing, you know, the punch that knocks you out is
the one you don't see coming.
The one you don't see coming.
So we need to watch.
Who would expect that totalitarianism would come via the courts, via a judiciary?
And in the name of rights.
And in the name of rights.
Imagine that.
What better way? What better punch to throw? So it is. So you see the concept of human rights. You will hear that all the time. When you hear
it's a mechanism to take away your rights.
Nowadays, it's a mechanism to take away your rights. Yeah. So, as we come to the close...
you had an example to say, though.
Yes. You know, Professor Bain went to exercise his right of freedom of expression as an expert witness.
As requested by the court. And he was fired.
He was fired because of human rights and diversity and tolerance.
And inclusivity.
Because
didn't include him though.
The Faculty of Law at the University of West Indies is probably the premier LGBT advocacy group in the Caribbean. And when Professor Bain went to Belize, he was going against the wishes, the desires.
And what they said was that LGBT rights take precedence over his right to give expert witness in an area of his speciality in the court.
Fortunately, we still have a plural democracy in Jamaica, and one of the judges in that court case said there was no doubt that Professor Bain was fired because he went to give expert testimony
That his
on
rights
behalf
were
of the churches, and that
abused.
he still had the right to freedom of expression in Jamaica. Let us keep our islands a plural democracy.
Don't take it for granted, people.
Yeah.
Vigilance is the price you pay for freedom.
This is it.
This has been Issachar Hour. It's our pleasure to have to be here again. Stay tuned for the third and probably final episode on the Christian Manifesto.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And we're very grateful to those who have sent feedback so far. Thank you. And remember, if you want to send feedback, ask questions, suggest topics for future programs, the number to send your WhatsApp to is 876-838-6070. That's 876-838-6070.